much, Stephen. So the way I'm going to run this, if it's okay, is because in good old traditional military fashion, we have PowerPoint. I think Microsoft would have gone under if it wasn't for us supporting the PowerPoint side of things. So, and I think, you know, after 45 minutes, you will not want to be staring at me any longer. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go into a PowerPoint presentation. Anytime anyone's got any questions, I'll do my best to keep an eye on what's there. But if not, Stephen, if you just say, oh, there's a question, and then I'll just pause the presentation, come back in, have a chat about things. And obviously at the end, we'll just go into a Q&A session, and I'll do my best to answer everything. I'm not going to hide from anything, but a lot of what I'll say, and I'll try and caveat it when it's important to do so, is that this is world according to DISCO. It doesn't mean it's MOD policy. It doesn't mean it's what the RAF is thinking, but it's really coming from my brain. I've added a slide, I've never put one in before, about leadership, because I felt like I should do, because I'm talking to you as a team. Please. And the challenges I get as a leader, but some of that will come out as we go through it. And there are certainly challenges here as our team. So I'll bring it up. So we've had the first ITFAF, so hopefully this one now will go smoothly, but I always do pause slightly when I'm looking to bring up and share a presentation. So I'm just going to try that again. Always good. Sorry, there'd be a faff. I'll probably have to go into this first and then bring up the presentation.
Lovely.
So everyone can see that. Now, the question I always ask at this point, can you still see me as well?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I always hate it when that happens. Okay, so so it is the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Now, I bring that up because there's a lot of people that believe that we are a civil entity or we're just kind of a lodger unit within the Royal Air Force. We're not. We are a core flying unit within the Royal Air Force. I have a defence task as well. Now, yeah, I've got to go a fair way down the list to get to my defence task. It's Defence Task 24, and that's ceremonial. But I have got a MOD-related task for me to be in existence. And I spend a lot of time telling people that we are part of the Royal Air Force. I am the officer commanding. I've been officer commanding now for 2.5 years, just over. It's a 3-year tour, which is unusual for a flying unit. They're normally shorter. And it's unusual that a squadron leader runs up such a large unit, but I'm a flight. And because of that, as a squadron leader, I get to run it. I'm known as Disco. You probably worked it out already from my surname. There's no great story behind it, unfortunately. It's just cutting off a few letters. I think the military on a whole are rubbish at coming up with nicknames. Start with the where does it all start for me? And it started a long time ago. Aviation has been in my blood from the moment my dad took me to my first air show at 3 years old at St Athan. I'm Welsh born and bred, working class engineer dad background. And I've been very lucky. He had friends that did gliding. I got involved with that very early. But whilst he took me and my brother to air shows and made us model aeroplanes and stuck them on the roof, it kind of came across to me, and it became my passion from a very early age, when my brother sees flying as how you get to holiday or on work trips. For me, though, I was gliding solo at the age of 14. 16, gliding started at 14, solo at 16. I had a flying scholarship through the Air Training Corps, which I joined at 13, and I was flying powered aircraft, that one actually on the screen, from Cardiff International Airport at the age of 17 solo, before I had my driving license. So, you know, I've been very privileged to get through that amount with a little bit of luck on the way and a bit of sponsorship. I had 2 plans. First plan, join the Royal Air Force. Second plan, my dad was very keen for this, is to go to university, get a degree, and then figure out what to do. Plan A worked for me. I'm very lucky. This is me at the age of just turned 20, getting my RAF wings. So I joined in 89, puts me up to about 32 years service at the moment, with another 10 to go. I haven't finished yet. I'm rattling through this bit because I know we want to talk about cool aeroplanes. This is what I've flown in the past. Everything with a red box around, I've been a qualified flying instructor. In fact, the first tour for me, before I did anything operational, was as a flying instructor. So I was a qualified flying instructor, flying the Jet Provost, top left on your screen, at the age of 20, teaching new fast jet pilots how to do business. I then went back through the system and did weapons training, and ended up flying the Jaguar for a long time. And one of your members, Bob Judson, is an old boss of mine. And that was on the Jaguar for about 10 years, doing operations all the way around the world. I've instructed and displayed the Tucano bottom left, and my last job before coming here was doing elementary flying training, teaching people on the Tutor, small little piston aircraft. I missed out all the cool stuff I'm flying now, and I'll come on to that. The Jaguar for me, this is the first bit I got. So very quickly about the Jaguar. Why did I go to the Jaguar? So I was lucky enough to get a single seat fast jet recommendation through training. And everybody thought, you go the Harrier then. That's where the best go. The biggest thing for me with work, and it's come back time and time again, is it's not what you're doing, it's who you're doing with. So for me, I talked to, when I was an instructor on my first tour, I said, right, talk to all the Harrier, Jaguar and Tornado people and said, what do you want to do next? And almost every Harrier man was there saying, because they were all men at the time, they were saying, well, I don't know, I've done the Harrier, I've gone around the world, maybe it's time to do something different. Every single Jaguar pilot I talked to said, I just want to get back to Coldershore and fly the Jaguar. For me, that sold it. And they were right. Flying the Jaguar around the world was incredible. The esprit de corps the unit had was made all the other forces jealous. We're all known as JAGmates. There are other words that they use for us as well, but it was that bond. And it certainly became that, you know, you looked after your squadron, then other JAGmates, and then it was the station and through. And we were a very effective fighting unit. And why wouldn't be? You know, there I was at the age of 24 with a helmet mounted sight on. This is dropping live weapons on a training range in America, in Arizona. Flying around with night vision goggles, 250 feet, doing up to 500 knots, you know, sort of hitting towards 600 miles an hour, with, in essence, looking at the world where it looks very green and it looks like you're looking through a toilet tube, but you're rushing at it incredibly quickly. So I had an incredible time, 10 years flying the Jaguar, pretty much getting to the top of where I could be as regards to an instructor and standards and evaluation. But all of that leads me to where I am now. I was showing somebody around the hangar today that's been doing a lot of work in their spare time for us, doing illustrations. So I was paying him back with about an hour and a half around the hangar. And while he was sitting in one of the aircraft, he said, did you ever want to be part of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight? And the answer was no. And that's not because I didn't want to do it, but it just seemed a goal that was unattainable. And I would say most aircrew would think of that. You have to get to the right point in your career and all of the planets align that the boss's job comes up when you're available, when you've got the right experience. So most people would love to do it, but I'd say most, if not all of the pilots in the Air Force would say it's probably something that will never happen to me. And I was certainly in that group. This is a beautiful photo of my first year. I'm flying the Hurricane at the far end of this photo, over the Thames Estuary, just south of Southend, on an air-to-air photo shoot. And there you've got 2 Spitfires, 2 Hurricanes. The nearest Spitfire is, fighter-wise, I would say the jewel in our crown. That's our Mark IIA Spitfire. She took part in the Battle of Britain, and it makes her the only airworthy Spitfire in the world that actually took part in that battle. Why is that important for me? Why are we the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight? Actually, if I have a look at my crest on my arm, it says the Royal Air Force Memorial Flight. However, we were coined the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, and we keep it because the Battle of Britain is very important to us as a service. I always like to think that the Navy have got Trafalgar, the Army have got Waterloo, and we have the Battle of Britain. It was a decisive moment within the Second World War. It was a decisive moment for air power, and it was probably one of the first major battles that were being watched by those that were being defended. So, you know, it was a really defining moment. So whilst there's been talk about should we just get rid of the Battle of Britain bit in our normal talk, I'd say no. The other thing is there is still one known Battle of Britain pilot, and certainly we need all of those veterans to you know, go up into the blue, and then we consider in the future. But I think it's a defining moment for us as a service. So what is the history of BBMF? So we started as a brainchild of Wing Commander Thompson. So this is a wing commander, he fought in the war, he was based at Biggin Hill, and he had one of our Hurricanes that's still in the hangar. Actually, it's not in there today, it's off on major maintenance, but it's under my command. And he used it as a hat, and I wish that was the Air Force I was in now. He would use that to get around places, go to meetings. But as he watched all the aircraft being retired, all the Spitfires and Hurricanes, he realized, whilst we were at the time doing these flypasts, he realized we were going to start losing the opportunity to do it. So he probably did a lot less paperwork than I'd have to do today, but he formed the historic aircraft flight at Biggin Hill, and the other 3 aircraft that joined them were 3 Mark 19 Spitfires as they were being retired from RAF Woodvale up towards Liverpool Way, where they're being used in the temperature and humidity monitoring flight, which is where we were exploring the higher atmosphere. And he managed to get those 4 aircraft, and they were set aside for the commemorative aspects of the Royal Air Force. After that, we moved around. You know, it ended up at the home of the Jaguar in Norfolk at RAF Coltishall for a considerable amount of time as well. But by 1976, we were here. Before we got here, we got the 44 Squadron Lancaster. Again, 44 Squadron had the Lancaster we now fly. They were trying to keep it airworthy. They would use it. They'd bring it out to families' days, but it just became a little bit too much hard work for them. 44 Squadron were actually the first Lancaster unit to operate the type, and that's why they had it. And eventually they said, would you mind coming across and collecting it? And the Lancaster had that incredible entry within its logbook saying cleared 1 flight only to bring it into Coltishall so it could start its work back to full airworthiness. And at that time, we changed to the Battle of Britain Memorial flight. 1976, we turned up here, and this has been our home at RAF Coningsby ever since. Where am I? And I'm in work now. I'm in the planning room of the flight, and we're based in Lincolnshire, about 20 miles away from Lincoln itself. One of 5 bases that's here. And on the unit, it's predominantly a frontline fast jet base with Typhoons. What were our most modern aircraft, but now we have the 5th generation Lightning II. But we've got the operator conversion unit, 3 frontline flying units, and also a small unit for operational tests and evaluation. And I take up 1 hangar of this big base, squeezed away in the corner. Now, this is one of 5 bases, so we call it RF Lincolnshire. There's probably no other county with that many active flying bases. 5, it's amazing. Take you back to 1944, the picture was very different. So there were 69 bomber bases in Lincolnshire. And then you add into that some fighter bases, night fighters, and some of their satellite bases. So it was a very different place when we went back to the war. And in my journey, pretty much from Lincoln to Coningsby, I can pass probably 5, actually it's probably more like 7 bomber bases just on my normal commute into work. So after that, we got another aircraft, the Dakota. That was an ex-Royal Royal Aircraft Establishment aircraft, what is now ETPS, the test pilots. And in 03, we got the crest approved, the one I wear proudly on my shoulder by the Queen. And our crest is now laid into the RAF Church at St Clement's Dane, just down the Strand. So what is the point? I talked about my Defence Task 24, ceremonial. However, there are other things. And actually, whilst the ceremonial is an incredibly important part of our job, there are 2 things that stick out for me. The first is the commemorative side of it, to commemorate not just the Second World War. A lot of people say that we're here just to remember those that lost their lives in the war. Actually, they, we look all the way back to the Royal Flying Corps. We look back to the Royal Naval Air Service, and we look forward to today. We're making veterans every day, and we are losing people on a regular amount, even into this modern day. So it's really important for us to look at the whole bit. Why we fly in the aircraft we fly. I think it's a good time of aviation. It was a very important part of the Royal Air Force as we started to modernise. It was obviously the major conflict. And the aircraft are just in that balance of age where they're still relatively easy to look after. And the problem is, as soon as you start getting into the jet age, everything becomes more complex. You need more engineering. As soon as you get into the jet age where there is any sort of electronics, then they become obsolete and incredibly hard to replicate or replace. So commemorative. What's the best bit about BBMF or OC-BBMF? It's not flying aircraft. That is a little bit of a cherry on the cake, but the best bit that I will take away from this job is sitting down with a cup of tea and talking to the veterans. Sitting underneath a Lancaster and talking to Johnny Johnson, last surviving gambuster. Sitting in a Spitfire and talking to Geoffrey Wellen, the youngest Battle of Britain pilot. That will be something I will take to me, and the stories I will continue to talk about. It is absolutely incredible. The other thing I love doing is the inspirational side of things. I've got the Air Training Corps badge there, but it's not necessarily about inspiring people to join the military. It's great if they do and they're interested in it. But we also work with the John Again Trust. We work with other local charities on STEM. The idea is to get the local youths or anybody that comes here to achieve the best they can. And I'll sit there and say, I'm working class background. I worked hard to get where I am, and working hard is important. Having a plan B is important. But if you can put your mind to it and work hard, it gives you the best chance. And for me, inspiring people to do their best and not look behind them and say, I could have done that if I worked a bit harder. What a waste. So making sure people put their effort in. And if you are unsuccessful, pick yourself up and go to plan B. And the last bit we do is to celebrate. And I'll come on to this later. The vast amount of aircrew on BBMF are actually part-time. There's only myself and one other pilot that work in this building. Everybody else has got a day job. So for us to go to air shows and for them to talk to the public and say, yeah, I just brought a Lancaster in, but actually last week I was delivering freight to Afghanistan, and to go through that, or, as we did, a little while back, taking aid into the Caribbean after the hurricane. So an incredibly important part of that. At the ceremonial, we get some great photos. The one there is going down the mall, and that is on the centenary of the RAF's 100th birthday, the centenary for us. And I'm tucked away in a Spitfire just behind the back of the Lancaster with the best view in the house, because flying line astern is easier. I've got a bit more time to look around a bit. So that was epic. So this is the flight. At the moment, we've grown a little bit. This was taken pre-COVID in 2019. We didn't really get a photo last year, although it was a good David Jason documentary. And the photo I got this year, we're all very spread out. So I thought I'd use one that makes us all look like we like each other. It's a small team. So to give you an idea, in the hangar here, I have 12 aircraft. There are 2 Chipmunks for training, and I'll come on to these shortly. There's 2 Hurricanes, 6 Spitfires, a Dakota and a Lancaster. 12 aircraft, that's squadron strength. I have 37 engineers. I have an ops team, the other pilot and one other for 2, and I've got an admin team of 4. Okay, an incredibly small team. When I consider the Red Arrows with their, they have 11 jets. No, sorry, they have, yes, 11 jets, 9 and 2 spare. I've got 125, and all those aircraft are the same. The Typhoon OCU, the Operation Conversion Unit across the road, for their 8 to 10 aircraft, they've got about 200 engineers, and they've got a much bigger support network behind them. So my engineers, I will say this to Chief of the Air Staff, are the best that I've come across. And the passion they've got and the drive to do what they want is incredible. And we blur the boundaries of what people would normally do on a unit, because if everyone just said, no, my job is A, we'd never get what we actually achieved done. And what we do with this amount of people is, in my eyes, incredible. So this is what we've been doing over the last sort of decade or two. We have ramped up our activity. I like to think we're leaning. We are certainly efficient. And we're now looking at trying to support. Now, weather and serviceability will get in the way, but we're trying to support around 1,000 events a year just from my small team. That eclipses all the activity of all the other display teams coming together, including Red Arrows. Now, I'm not being disingenuous. The Red Arrows need to stay as a team. Everyone gets quite cheesed off if you just get one Red Hawk. They expect to see 9, where I can divide and conquer. And if I've got 6 aircraft going out, I have got the opportunity to pick up a lot of appearances. If COVID hadn't spoiled play last year on Armed Forces Day alone, we had planned for my team to cover 104 events. So we're disappointed that that didn't come off. This gives you an idea, and I go with 2020 because this year is not normal. This year, COVID is still biting us. So we had planned the entire 2020 season. The planning starts the September prior and runs up to the February before the event. So we were ready to go for 2020, and we had got over 1,200 bids. We planned 90 displays where we do proper displays at air shows and 950 fly pass. The fly pass will do for anyone that puts a bid in. We will never do a private event. These are public events for the nation because the aircraft are owned by the nation. So now there is one caveat. I do one birthday, and that's the Queen because she pays the salary. But that's the only one I'll do. Don't ask me to come to your birthday, please. The heat map there gives you an idea of where the most activity is. Now, I think if you put a heat map of the population density, it would be in a similar area as well. So we do a lot of stuff there. The problem I've got, I do want to go up, and the way this heat map's drawn, we definitely go out further. We go into Wales, we go into Scotland. But I've got to look at how many hours I've got and where I'm going to. And there are times, and we're trying to reach out more into the devolved nation. I'm Welsh. I would love to go to Wales more often. But I have to look, certainly with Scotland, there's an element where if somebody says, up in Lossiemouth, can you come up and do one event? That is a lot of hours used on my aircraft for one event. Now, it depends what the event is. It depends on the priority of that. We'll look at that in real detail. But it is sometimes a snag. And a lot of the events for the fly past, we fit in with the displays that pay for our way. So, generally it is down in that population density we do things. The displays, it's core of what we do. We are a display team. We are one of only 3 full-time display teams in the Royal Air Force. The other is the famous Royal Air Force Aerobatics team, the Red Arrows. And the other one is the Falcons. Now they fall with style. They're the display team for the parachuting. But again, they're the only 3. All the others are part-time individuals doing it for a year. Displaying for us is our core business. Our core display is the Lancaster Spitfire and Hurricane as a 3-ship. We love to come in over the crowd rear arrivals, and those sort of things are sanctioned up to, really are briefed into the Chief of the Air Staff because the extra risk of coming over the crowd. But actually, I see no risk whatsoever. I'm flying straight and level, and I've got more risk as I'm doing other maneuvers, just flying around normally to get from A to B. But it's seen at very high level. And our displays, if we do a Lancaster Hurricane and Spitfire, is about 20 minutes. I am not, and I have to tell all my crews that arrive, I'm not a show-off, because that's a dangerous thing as a display pilot. I would like to say I'm a showman. And me, although I'm here talking to you now, my name and my qualifications and who I am, I like to think are irrelevant. What is relevant is the aircraft, the sound, the look of them, and what they represent. And for me, every event I do, if I can consider there's one child asking his mother or father, what is that? And they get described what the aircraft are, what they represent, then I'm winning. Engineering, it is an issue for BBMF. How long can we, I'm going to probably answer some questions now. How long can we keep these things flying for? In perpetuity. We can go on forever. If you can bend metal and rivet it together, you can make a Spitfire. Now, I'm being incredibly disingenuous to my talented engineers and the whole force team that support us, because we are, indebted to, and well, we pay them handsomely as well, to our contractors. Because without that very specialist engineering for engines and some of the airframe items and the real depth work, we wouldn't be able to continue. But these aren't rocket science. These are things. In fact, there are companies in this country still that will create pretty much 95% of brand new Spitfire using the drawings and jigs that they have. There's a company on the Isle of Wight that will create you a brand new Spitfire fuselage. They'll create also brand new wings at Duxford and Biggin Hill. Nobody wants a brand new Spitfire. So everyone wants to have an aircraft with some sort of lineage. But there are some Spitfires flying out there, which is probably 1% original material. And sometimes it's just the bronze plate from the registration and the manufacturer's marking found on it. And that's not a bad thing. I missed my opportunity when we did our last year, when we did the BBMF documentary with Sir David Jason. I missed my opportunity. I always say this, that there's an element of triggers broom about our aircraft. And that's because if you want to fly an aircraft or a historic car or operate a historic locomotive, you have to change parts. They will wear out and you have to change old for new. We're very lucky. Some of our aircraft are probably 75% original material, which is huge. It's some of the highest. One of the Mark 19 Spitfires went to Duxford and one of their chief engineers said to me, this is the most original Spitfire I've ever worked on. So we're quite lucky that way, but over time it will reduce. The problem we've got is when you go to RAF Cosford now to do your engineering training, funny old thing, they're not training anybody now on riveting. They're not training anybody on piston engines. It's all turbines and it's all composite work. So we do a huge amount of engineering training in the hangar. So whilst my small team are thinking about how we fix things, we've also got another very small team of 4 considering how we train the new people coming in. How do we get somebody to be suitably qualified on maintaining a Merlin engine? And that's a real challenge for us. And my senior engineer officer, Mandy, is taking this on with an amazing amount of gusto. And hopefully, well, we're now delivering some fully accredited courses, and that's going to carry on throughout this year and into the future to make sure that we are ready to keep looking after these aircraft in perpetuity. We've got modern avionics in our aircraft. This is a Spitfire, and you can see it's bristling with modern equipment. Well, maybe not. So I've stuck an iPhone on my leg, which is running a moving map software. On the left-hand side, we've attached a new radio. There's an old GPS underneath the where the site would have been, and also PFLARM, which is a collision warning equipment normally used for gliders, but is brilliant. But actually, take those little elements out, and you've got a pretty representative aircraft that we're flying. And certainly the veterans would get in and really show me around and explain what they thought. PFLARM, I'll bring this up because something so small, and this can, I think, happen across so many areas. There's some small wins that have massive outcomes. And for us, the safety that PFLARM brought, so it's a very small, cheap piece of equipment, generally used for gliders, but will give me a picture of collision avoidance around me. For electronically, those people transmitting on it. It's great for gliders, and it's also becoming better and better for light aircraft as well. And they're some of my biggest threats. I don't worry about bumping into an airliner because I don't go into that airspace, but I am using the open airspace shared by gliders and light aircraft on weekends when they are going to fly to enjoy themselves. So this bit of kit, really cheap, has got a massive amount of safety that we rely on at weekends. So I'm also the chief instructor here, and I've got to take somebody from the Typhoon, the left cockpit, and get them to be good in the right-hand cockpit, which is a Hurricane. Now, I flew the Jaguar. I haven't flown the Typhoon. I've had one go in it, and it is just breathtaking. However, my replacement at the end of the year is a Typhoon instructor. And in his words, the Typhoon is easy to fly, but very hard to operate. That's because you're not flying it, the computer's flying it. However, the Hurricane is very easy to operate. There's almost no buttons to press in there, but very hard to fly. So the Typhoon is fly-by-wire. There's a computer flying it, and that's a computer joystick. I'm flying with wires. In the Hurricane, that control column is connected initially by a bicycle chain, then to pull rods, and then to cables to the back. There is nothing that is helping me out apart from the initial design, so Hawker Design Studio, making that fly as easy as you can. And it is quite tricky. And this is the initial fighter training I'll take somebody through. 25 hours in the Chipmunk, 10 hours in the backseat, up to 2 hours in a Harvard. And that's really to give them an idea that they can fly something bigger with a safety net, which is me in the aircraft as an instructor. And then they read the book. I show them around, they learn the checks, and I pat them on the back and say, off you go then. Because there are no simulators, there are no two-seat. Actually, there is one two-seat Hurricane, but we don't use it for training. It would not be suitable for them. So I generally use the words which were uttered to Geoffrey Wellham when he first arrived on 92 Squadron at the beginning of the Battle of Britain, when he admitted to his boss that he had never flown a Spitfire before. And he said, okay, there's a Spitfire outside, take it flying, and if you break it, there'll be hell to pay. And they're the same words I used to the station commander when he went solo recently. And that's, you know, the lineage that we go through. So why is this so tricky? The first thing is having a tail dragger. So this is what we call them. They all have tail wheels, little wheels at the back. And those little wheels are like shopping trolley wheels. They spin round, they caster, they wiggle a bit. But the problem is on the ground, it's like throwing a dart backwards. The center of gravity is behind the main wheels and it wants to overtake. Center of gravity is like being at the front when they're being propelled forward. That's why you put a dart with a heavy bit at the front and the light flight at the back. If it does happen in an aircraft, in a tailwheel aircraft, it's called a ground loop, and it happens quickly, it happens violently, and it can be bad for the aircraft. The last Hurricane that ground looped a year ago at Duxford, gear collapsed, engine not written off, but needed work, and the propeller written off, and the undercarriage needed a lot of work. The chap who was flying it he was a very rich brain surgeon, so I can now say what I'm doing is harder than brain surgery. Might be pushing my luck a bit with that one. And we move on and move through. The Hurricane is actually harder to fly than a Spitfire. It's only a year younger, but it's old technology. And I think the aerodynamics in it are older. Flying it, I flew it today. I was very lucky doing an air test. And it feels like you're stirring porridge. The controls are heavy. You sit on top of the radiator, so it's at least 20 degrees hotter than the outside air temperature. You know, you're breathing hot air, and I'm not expecting sympathy, by the way. But she's forgiving in landing. If you look at the picture of that Hurricane, the pilot can almost see over the nose when he's landing. The undercarriage is a long way apart, and just like standing with your legs apart, it gives you great stability. And you've got a massive fin down the back. So actually, whilst it's harder to fly, it's easier or more forgiving to land. But pretty much, they won't have got to 10 hours, probably about 3.5 hours in the Hurricane, and we do our public display authority in front of our 2-star. It'll be their 7th trip ever in a Warbird, and they'll have about 3.5 hours. The trip after this, we're off displaying to the public. So I like to take a leaf and a quote out of Blackadder Goes Forth, when they were talking about the survival rates in the Royal Flying Corps in the First War, where they called themselves the 20-minuters. And I call BBMF the modern 20-minuters because that's about the amount of time you get to practice something before you do it live in front of an audience. So the learning curve is steep. So I look for the best, and the selection process is, you know, I'm very lucky. I get a lot of people wanting to do it, and I get to pick the best. The Spitfires then. I've got 6 Spitfires, and I know that sounds a bit greedy, but it gives me a great amount of opportunity to use the right ones for the right job. So at the top of these photos, you've got 2 what we call baby Spitfires. The Mark II on the right, Mark V on the left. The Mark II, the only Battle of Britain veterans still flying. And on the left are our most prodigious warfighting aircraft, our Mark V, 143 operational missions in the war, including supporting the ill-fated Dieppe Parade and D-Day. That aircraft that we fly was over D-Day. They've got little quips. They're very light. They've got an incredible wing and they've got a tiny fin. They are a real handful to land. And in fact, because of that, we have a reduced crosswind. The first aircraft I let people fly as a Spitfire is the Mark 9 in the middle, and bottom right, the Mark 16. They've got a little bit more weight, still got a Merlin engine, but a slightly bigger rudder. So they sit down and stay down a bit better, and you can control them a little bit better in the landing. Flying these aircraft, though, is far easier. The first time I flew a Spitfire, it was that moment of, right, now I can see what the fuss was about. Moving from the old Hurricane into a modern Spitfire, in their terms, it was a step change, not in just the capability of the aircraft, being a third lighter with the same engine, the performance was just incredible, but also the ease of flying it. You're going from a Hurricane where you're hauling it around with both hands to a Spitfire with a couple of fingers. And there is that feeling of, people say that you don't strap into a Spitfire, you kind of wear it. And I can see why that comes across. And if I had to go to war on an aircraft, without a doubt, it would be a Spitfire. If I had to land one of these in a desert strip, which was really rough and horrible, it'd be a Hurricane. The last aircraft I've not talked about, now you're probably saying there's 5 Spitfires, they're not 6. Well, they're all different marks, apart from I've got 2 Mark 19s, which are shown in the bottom left. These are beasts. These are the last aircraft that I would let people fly in the flight, because at this point in the development of the Spitfire, they've really upped their game. They, in essence, most fighter pilots will say, there's never too much power. This is close. They've now put a Rolls-Royce Griffon engine in. That's got an extra 1,000 horsepower. These in the war, the only thing that would pretty much catch them was going to be the new jets. And I've cruised along with a bit of a tailwind at 300 knots, which is pretty impressive. Aircraft like this, they're photographic reconnaissance, and their speed was their defense, because they've got no guns, just cameras. But an aircraft like these has the operational single engine piston altitude record of just over 51,500 feet. It's above your airline as you're flying. So an incredible performing aircraft. But I've got other people. So at the moment, I've got 5 fighter aircrew, and I've got 19 bomber aircrew of various flavors. And that's the right-hand seat of the Lancaster, a very privileged position to be in for that gentleman. But this is where they come from. All of my bomber aircrew come from frontline aircraft. Now, I know one of those is Navy, but at the time I couldn't, American Navy, I couldn't find a Poseidon in British colours. I do need to change that. We do have them now. A400, Hercules, Sentry. Now, some of these are going out to service, in the near future, but my aircrew will then move on to different things. And I've got to get them from that to this. This is the Dakota cockpit. It's a challenge. The only good news they've got is they can fly with an instructor. So there is a safety blanket while they do it. But it is a challenging thing for them to do. And they're going from a high performance aircraft, when you talk about engine failure after takeoff, to something which you have to nurse. She will fly on one engine, but you can't take for granted. So, it's an incredibly hard working environment for them. Operating at low level, map and stopwatch, bit of a GPS that we're using at the moment, but it's not particularly reliable. And that's what she looks like. She's in D-Day colors. So if you see anything with black and white stripes, it's not camouflage. Obviously, only zebras would say that, but it certainly would make you stand out. And the D-Day stripes, the invasion stripes, are put on the night before D-Day. So if you see an aircraft like this, it would have been from D-Day -1 and to the rest of the war. And this is a conspicuity, visual conspicuity. They realized they couldn't tell people what's the difference between a Heinkel, the German bomber, and a Dakota. So all you had to tell the Navy and the Army was, don't shoot at anything with black and white stripes. We used this in the first Gulf War. If you look at pictures of the coalition forces' armored vehicles rolling into the Iraqi desert, they all had triangles, day-glow triangles on top, because we didn't see a threat from the Iraqi Air Force. We saw a threat of blue on blue from our own. So we still use that even up to 91. And then the jewel in the crown, bar none. I am a fighter pilot, so those people with fast jet background fly the fighters, and those with the heavy background fly the bombers. There is nothing in between. And whilst I would love to say I could put up 6 Spitfires and it would turn more heads than the Lancaster, I'd be lying. Everyone should have heard, the amazing speech from Winston Churchill, where he described the few. So never in the field of human conflict have so many owed so much to so few. And the few was then the coining phrase for the fighter pilots from the Battle of Britain through. In fact, the Battle of Britain fighter pilots started a trend of undoing their top button on their tunic. So they stood out of the crowd. So they weren't just pilots, they were fighter pilots. And we do remember the few now and talking to them, and I've been privileged before a lot of them passed away to talk and share stories, was incredible. On the side of our Lancaster, we have a plaque that says, it's got the Bomber Command crest in it, and it is to remember the many. On the side of the the Bomber Command Memorial in London, just off Green Park, the figure is 55,573 aircrew lost. That's 43% of the entire force. No other British force of that size has lost that many people. Okay, the chances of doing your operational tour, 2 tours, 50 missions, was 15 to 20%. In fact, you had more chance of surviving the trenches as a sub-lieutenant in the First World War. Yet they signed up and they did it every day. And one thing you'll see when our crews get on board the Lancaster, in and out, they will touch that crest as a mark of respect and remembrance to those very brave crew. I talked to one rear gunner and I said, why did you go air gunner? You know, why not pilot or navigator? He actually was joining towards the back end of the war. And actually, at that point, we had almost too many aircrew. And he realized he was not going to be able to do his navigator training in time. So he just went up to the trainers and said, what is the quickest course? What's my quickest route into an operational Lancaster unit? And he became an air gunner. Incredible bravery. Geoffrey Wellham, I always love to quote though, you know, would we do the same now? Would today's generation do the same? From Geoffrey Wellham, he had no doubt. And I've talked to Bomber Command veterans who, in their words, were just doing their job, that faced with the same issues, faced with, you know, we stop them or we are invaded, that today's used to do the same. And I love that. I love seeing that there's that much, you know, sort of passion for our youth today. We fly them together. You know, we like to get up there. We like to get these aircraft together, and they're relatively well matched, so we can put on a good little show of things. And 2 years ago, when I came in, I regenerated our ability to dispatch parachutists. So if you look at this photo, the aircraft top left are Dakota dispatching members of the Air Assault Brigade, the paras, out into the Sannerville drop zone just outside Caen, just behind the beaches of D-Day. And that was to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And if you look at the crew, there's one with a slightly different hat on. He was a general from the French paras who said it would be a privilege for him to come along and jump with the team. And it was a privilege for us as well. Flying top cover that day was our Mark V Spitfire, and that aircraft was there 75 years previously. So I'm going to finish now because I have, even with a late start, been talking a lot. I do that. So I thought I'd finish with a little bit of leadership, which is new for me. So what is my problem? So the first thing is, what do I think between management and leadership? There's always that question, what is leadership? I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar. But when I came into this job, and this is the first time where I've been given command of a flying unit, I sat and thought for a little while. Why I could come in and manage, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to lead a unit, even though I wasn't leading a frontline unit. And what did I think? Well, I remember reading something on a screen once. In fact, it was a poster in a room, and it's always resonated with me. And something I've tried to live by over the last 2.5 years. And that is the difference between management and leadership. A manager does things right, and a leader does the right thing. For me, it's a small thing, but it's hugely important. And there have been times in this job where I had to maybe not do things right, but I was doing the right thing for my people that were under my command. The other thing is, for me, the one thing that strikes for leadership completely is inspiration. If you can't inspire your people to do things, I could drag them kicking and screaming the way I want to go, and they would do it, because in the military, I've got more stripes on my shoulder. But that's not what you're going to get best at your team. If you can inspire them, if you can bring them along on the journey, if you get them to say, gosh, yes, what a great idea. I always think that if I was in the army, unless you've inspired your team, your cadre, if they haven't got that feeling of a team and doing it for each other, I doubt it you get many volunteers to charge the machine gun post to be like, no, you can do it, sir, I'm off. So, you know, it's really important to engender that bit that everyone's doing it and to get them along with it. And it can be tricky, but it's something I've tried hard to do. And only at the end of it, I'm sure over a beer at the end of my tour will I find out from them personally what they think of them. I've got a small team. This is why I said earlier, if I came here and said, I'm a pilot, I've flown my Spitfire into this airfield and I walk away and say, it's nothing to do with me, we will not achieve what we could achieve. And the new engineers are very surprised if they've been caught in traffic going down to an airfield near London to find that I have refueled the aircraft, I've done the paperwork and it's already been pushed away into the hangar. And they're like, whoa, but we have to do that. We have to blur the lines between what military would say would be your normal job. And the engineers do that. And certainly within our rank trades, they do. I've got to be careful, but I want to empower people to the maximum extent that the regulations will allow and they're capable of. And some people we all know are more capable than others. And that is a real balancing act. But if you empower them, that does then motivate them. It does inspire them and they want to do it. The rank gradient, it's easy to see who's the boss in the military because we put it up here. And I walk into a room and if somebody has got more stripes, they might be talking rubbish, I say sir or Mark. And that can be an issue because I'm only a squadron leader. And I say this to all my team here, I will do my best, but I'm only a squadron leader. And that keeps my mind focused on the limits of what I can achieve. But I'm very canny, I suppose. One of my fighter pilots is the station commander. Give him a vested interest, and I've got a very good ally. Last year, I had an air commodore flying with me, a really good ally, when all of a sudden I found I needed somebody to help me. So a little bit political there, but it's keeping people informed, keeping the hierarchy informed. Nobody likes surprises. And the last bit, I get asked by the Military Aviation Authority, what are my pressures? Am I under, because I'm a low rank compared to the rest of the Air Force in flying this, am I under external pressure? Zero. If the Chief of the Air Staff rings me up and says, you need to fly here, if it's not ready, it will not go. I'm not on a career push. I've been a squadron leader for 16 years now. And I will only operate these aircraft when it's absolutely safe to do so. The pressure I've got to deal with is internal pressure. The frustrations of my engineers who are desperate to get these aircraft flying, who get really wound up when the spare part hasn't arrived on time. And who will be pacing the corridor when they believe a wrong decision's been made because they want to see these aircraft out. So while that's quite easy to do, it's a real challenge because I need to keep inspiring. I need to keep that energy there, but I also need to channel it into something a little bit more constructive. So it's the internal pressures that I will continually battle with. But that's better than a lot of people have to got all the external pressures. And that wraps me up. And wow, I talk a while. So I'm hoping we've got time for questions.